The crack of a hand across Elizabeth Kane's face echoed through the cramped bedroom, her cheek burning with the sting of her husband's rage. Blood trickled from the corner of her mouth as she stumbled backward, refusing to cry out despite the pain radiating through her body. It was 1874 in the unforgiving town of Willow Creek, Wyoming Territory, and Elizabeth had committed an unforgivable sin in the eyes of her husband, Jeremiah Kane. She had refused to sell her late father's pocket watch to fund his gambling debts. "When I give you an order, woman, you obey," Jeremiah roared, his whiskey-soaked breath washing over her as he gripped her arms tight enough to leave bruises. "That watch would have covered what I owe to Sullivan. Now he's threatening to take the house." Elizabeth raised her chin despite the throbbing pain. "That watch is the only thing I have left of my father. I won't let you gamble it away like everything else." His eyes narrowed dangerously. "You think you have a choice. You're my wife. You do as I say." The next blow sent her sprawling to the floor, her vision blurring as Jeremiah stormed from the room. Elizabeth remained there, tasting copper and salt as tears mingled with blood. 3 years of marriage to a man who had once promised her the world, now reduced to this fear, pain, and the constant threat of worse. Morning light streamed through the window, illuminating the bruises that had bloomed overnight on Elizabeth's pale skin. She winced as she packed a small carpet bag with the few possessions truly her own, a faded photograph of her parents, the silver pocket watch that had sparked Jeremiah's rage, 2 dresses, and the small amount of money she'd managed to hide away over months. The decision had crystallized sometime in the dark hours she would rather face death in the wilderness than endure another day under Jeremiah Kane's fist. Jeremiah had left at dawn for the saloon, giving her the chance she needed. Elizabeth slipped from the house and headed toward the stagecoach office, keeping her head down as she passed neighbors who had surely heard the commotion from the night before, but chose to look away. "Where to, madam?" asked the ticket clerk, eyeing her bruised face with uncomfortable recognition. "How far will this get me?" Elizabeth placed her meager savings on the counter. The clerk counted the coins. Silver Creek. "It's about a day's journey west." "Then that's where I'm going." The stagecoach bounced mercilessly along the rutted trail, jostling Elizabeth's already aching body. She sat across from an elderly couple who pretended not to notice her injuries, and a traveling salesman who couldn't stop staring. Hours passed in uncomfortable silence as the Wyoming landscape rolled by, endless skies above rocky plains and distant mountains. A sudden crack split the air, followed by the driver's shout. The coach lurched violently, throwing Elizabeth against the side as horses whinnied in panic. Then came another sound, hoofbeats and rough voices. "Everyone out! This is a robbery!" Elizabeth's heart hammered as passengers disembarked with hands raised. 3 men on horseback, faces obscured by bandanas, trained revolvers on the small group. The leader, a man with cold eyes above his mask, dismounted and approached. Valuables in the bag, watches, jewelry, cash, all of it. The elderly couple reluctantly surrendered their wedding bands while the salesman emptied his wallet. When the bandit reached Elizabeth, she clutched her carpet bag tightly. "I have nothing of value," she said, voice steadier than she felt. The man grabbed her bag, ripping it open to reveal her meager possessions. The silver pocket watch caught the sunlight, drawing his attention immediately. "Nothing, eh? Hand it over." "No." Elizabeth snatched it back. "It was my father's." The bandit's eyes darkened. "I don't like being disobeyed, lady." Before she could react, he struck her across the face, reopening the cut on her lip from Jeremiah's assault. Elizabeth stumbled, but didn't release the watch. The outlaw raised his hand again. "That's enough." The voice came from behind them, deep and calm, but with an unmistakable edge of authority. Elizabeth turned to see a tall man on horseback, rifle trained on the bandits. His face was weathered by sun and wind, with stubble shadowing a strong jaw. A sheriff's badge glinted on his chest. "I suggest you boys ride on before this gets unpleasant," the newcomer said. "There's 3 of us and 1 of you, lawman," the lead bandit sneered. The sheriff's expression didn't change. "I count that as 3 mistakes about to be made." Something in his steady gaze made the bandits reconsider. With muttered curses, they mounted their horses and galloped away, leaving their victims shaken but unharmed. The sheriff dismounted, approaching Elizabeth as the driver worked to repair the broken wheel that had stranded them. "Are you all right, madam?" "Yes," Elizabeth said automatically, though the reopened cut stung fiercely. "Thank you for your intervention." His eyes took in her bruises, both fresh and older ones, visible on her wrists. "Those men didn't do all that damage." Elizabeth looked away. "No," he nodded, understanding without requiring explanation. "I'm Sheriff Adam Steele of Silver Creek. I was heading back from a prisoner transport when I heard the commotion." "Elizabeth Kane," she replied. "I'm traveling to Silver Creek." "Family there?" "No," she admitted. "No family anywhere." Sheriff Steele studied her for a moment before nodding again. "The wheel will take some time to fix. Silver Creek's only about 5 miles ahead. I could give you a ride, save you the wait." Elizabeth hesitated, years of hard experience making her wary of male kindness. Yet something in his steady gaze suggested neither pity nor ulterior motive, just a straightforward offer of assistance. "Thank you," she finally said. "I'd appreciate that." The journey to Silver Creek passed mostly in silence, with Elizabeth seated behind Sheriff Steele on his sturdy bay gelding. The town appeared on the horizon smaller than Willow Creek, but with the same frontier architecture of wooden buildings stretching along a main street backed by mountains that seemed closer and more imposing than those near her former home. "We're not much," Steele said as they approached, "but we're growing. Got a hotel, general store, couple of saloons that stay mostly civil. Doc Peters has a practice near my office." Elizabeth recognized the suggestion in his last comment. "I don't need a doctor." "As you wish." He didn't press the issue. The sheriff's office stood near the center of town, a modest wooden building with cells visible through a barred window. Next door was a 2-story structure with Silver Creek Hotel painted across its facade. Steele reined his horse to a stop before it. "Mrs. Abigail Foster runs the place," he explained, helping Elizabeth dismount. "She's good people. Sometimes has work for those needing employment." Elizabeth straightened her dress self-consciously. "I don't have much money for accommodation." "First night's on me," Steele said, then added quickly at her expression, "as a welcome to Silver Creek, nothing more." Before she could protest, he continued, "Mrs. Foster's husband died in a mining accident 3 years back. She understands. Difficult circumstances." Understanding dawned on Elizabeth. "You think she'll recognize my situation?" "I think she won't ask questions you don't want to answer," he corrected. "The rest is your business." Abigail Foster proved to be exactly as Sheriff Steele had described a practical woman in her 40s who took one look at Elizabeth's bruised face and showed her to a small but clean room without comment on her appearance. "Sheriff says you might be looking for work," Mrs. Foster said, placing a folded towel on the washstand. "I could use help with cleaning and serving meals. Doesn't pay much, but includes room and board." "That would be perfect," Elizabeth said gratefully. "I can start immediately." "Tomorrow's soon enough. Get some rest tonight." When Mrs. Foster left, Elizabeth sank onto the bed, overwhelmed by the day's events. She'd woken in her husband's house, expecting another day of walking on eggshells, and now found herself in a strange town with a new name and the possibility of work. She pulled her father's pocket watch from her bag, running her thumb over the engraved surface that had caused such strife. For the first time in years, she felt the faintest stirring of hope. Sheriff Adam Steele troubled her thoughts as she prepared for sleep. His kindness seemed genuine, yet experience had taught Elizabeth to distrust men who appeared honorable at first. Jeremiah had been charming once, full of promises and tender words. The transformation had begun gradually after their wedding, a harsh word here, a controlling demand there, escalating to the violence that had finally driven her away. Sleep came uneasily, filled with dreams of Jeremiah finding her, dragging her back to Willow Creek to face his wrath. The following weeks established a routine that brought Elizabeth unexpected comfort. She rose early to help prepare breakfast for hotel guests, spent mornings cleaning rooms, and assisted with lunch and dinner service. Mrs. Foster proved to be a fair employer who valued Elizabeth's diligent work and respected her privacy. Silver Creek revealed itself as a community of surprising complexity. Miners, ranchers, and townspeople coexisted in general harmony, with occasional disruptions that brought Sheriff Steele into action. Elizabeth observed him sometimes from the hotel window firm, but fair in his dealings, respected even by those he arrested. Their paths crossed occasionally, a nod in passing on the boardwalk, a brief exchange when he took meals at the hotel. He never mentioned the circumstances of their first meeting or the bruises that gradually faded from her face, treating her with a careful courtesy that acknowledged boundaries without establishing familiarity. A month into her new life, Elizabeth was serving dinner when the hotel door burst open, admitting a trail boss and several cowboys fresh from delivering cattle to the newly constructed railroad spur. They were flush with pay and ready to celebrate, ordering whiskey with their meals and filling the dining room with boisterous conversation. "Got rooms available, Mrs. Foster?" the trail boss called out. "My boys deserve real beds after 3 months on the drive." "3 rooms left," Abigail replied. "Should fit y'all if some don't mind sharing." Elizabeth moved between tables, refilling coffee cups and clearing plates. One cowboy, younger than the rest with an arrogant set to his shoulders, caught her wrist as she passed. "Ain't you a pretty thing?" he said, alcohol heavy on his breath. "Why don't you sit a spell and keep me company?" "Please release me, sir," Elizabeth said evenly. "I have work to do." His grip tightened. "Work can wait. I've been looking at nothing but cow backsides for months." Elizabeth's heart raced as memories flooded back Jeremiah's cruel hands, the helpless feeling of being controlled. "Let go. Just a little conversation," he insisted, pulling her closer. "The lady asked you to let her go." Sheriff Steele stood in the doorway, his expression neutral, but his eyes hard. The young cowboy scowled but released Elizabeth's wrist. "Just being friendly, Sheriff." "Be friendly somewhere else." Steele nodded toward the saloon across the street. "Miss Kane isn't interested." The trail boss called out to his man, "Peters, leave the woman be and mind your manners. We're guests here." The tension broke, and Elizabeth retreated to the kitchen, hands trembling slightly. Moments later, the door swung open, and Sheriff Steele entered. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. Elizabeth nodded, embarrassed by her reaction. "Yes, I overreacted. It wasn't like..." "You didn't overreact," Steele interrupted gently. "You set a boundary." He ignored it. "You don't need to explain yourself." Something in his matter-of-fact acceptance broke through Elizabeth's carefully constructed walls. "Thank you." He nodded once. "I make rounds past the hotel each night. You have any trouble, you just let me know." After he left, Mrs. Foster appeared beside Elizabeth. "Adam Steele's a good man," she said thoughtfully. "Not like most." "I'm not looking for any kind of man," Elizabeth replied quickly. "Good or otherwise." Abigail's expression softened with understanding. "Wasn't suggesting you were, just making an observation." That night, Elizabeth found herself standing at her window, watching as Sheriff Steele made his promised rounds, a solitary figure moving through pools of lamplight. For the first time, she allowed herself to consider that perhaps not all men were like Jeremiah Kane. The seasons turned, summer heat giving way to autumn crispness. Elizabeth's position at the hotel had solidified, with Mrs. Foster increasingly relying on her to manage the dining room while she handled the books and room assignments. The bruises had long since faded, though Elizabeth still startled at loud noises and kept to herself around male guests. Sheriff Steele remained a consistent presence, taking his meals at the hotel several times a week and exchanging pleasantries that gradually evolved into actual conversation. Elizabeth learned he had come west after the war between the states, serving as a deputy in several towns before accepting the sheriff's position in Silver Creek 3 years earlier. He never pressed for details about her past, and she offered none, maintaining the careful distance that felt safe. On a crisp October morning, Elizabeth was shopping at the general store when she overheard a conversation between the storekeeper and a man she didn't recognize. "Passed through Willow Creek last week," the stranger was saying. place is going downhill fast since they lost their sheriff to that influenza outbreak." Elizabeth froze, her hand hovering over a bolt of fabric. "Shame about that," the storekeeper replied. "Any other news from those parts?" "The usual troubles. Some fellow raising hell about his runaway wife, Kane, I think the name was, offering a reward for information, said she stole from him before disappearing." Elizabeth's blood turned to ice. Setting down her basket, she slipped from the store and hurried back to the hotel, her mind racing. Jeremiah was looking for her, spinning lies about theft to justify his search. If he discovered her whereabouts, she was so distracted that she collided with Sheriff Steele on the boardwalk outside the hotel. "Whoa there," he said, steadying her with a hand on her arm. "What's the rush, Miss Kane?" The concern in his eyes nearly undid her composure. "Nothing. I just remembered something urgent from Mrs. Foster." Steele's expression suggested he didn't believe her, but he simply nodded. "If you need anything—" "I'm fine," Elizabeth insisted, pulling away and hurrying inside. That evening, as she helped serve dinner, Elizabeth noticed a newcomer seated alone in the corner, a man with a familiar slouch to his shoulders that sent a chill through her. When he glanced up, relief washed over her. It wasn't Jeremiah, just a passing resemblance that her frightened mind had magnified. After the dining room cleared, Elizabeth sat at an empty table, rubbing her temples against an approaching headache. The door opened, and she looked up to see Sheriff Steele. "Mrs. Foster said you weren't feeling well," he said, remaining by the door. "Thought I'd check if you needed anything." Elizabeth summoned a smile. "Just tired. Thank you for your concern." Instead of leaving, Steele hesitated, then took a seat across from her. "Miss Kane, Elizabeth, I don't mean to pry, but you've seemed troubled today. If you're in some kind of danger, I'd like to help." "Why would you think I'm in danger?" she asked defensively. "Because you looked terrified when you ran into me earlier." "And because you're looking over your shoulder right now as we speak." Elizabeth hadn't realized she was doing exactly that, scanning the room, as if expecting Jeremiah to materialize from the shadows. The realization that her fear was so transparent broke something loose inside her. "My husband," she admitted quietly. "I left him in Willow Creek. I heard today he's looking for me." Steele's expression remained carefully neutral. "I see. And you left because—" "Because I grew tired of being beaten for disobedience," Elizabeth said, the words spilling out after months of silence. "Because I didn't want to die by his hand." The sheriff's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. "Under the law, a husband has certain rights over his wife, but no law gives a man the right to abuse her. The law didn't protect me in Willow Creek. The sheriff there was Jeremiah's drinking companion. The pastor told me to be a more obedient wife when I sought counsel." "Silver Creek isn't Willow Creek," Steele said firmly, "and I'm not that sheriff." Elizabeth studied his face, searching for deceit or judgment and finding neither. "What would you do if he came here looking for me?" "I'd make it clear that in my town, no one has the right to harm another person, a husband or otherwise." His eyes met hers steadily. "No one commands you now, Elizabeth. Not him, not me, not anyone who'd use fear to control you." Something warm bloomed in Elizabeth's chest at his words, not quite trust, but perhaps its precursor. "Thank you. If you're worried, I can keep an eye out for strangers coming to town, especially from Willow Creek's direction." "I'd appreciate that," she said, then added hesitantly, "I didn't steal from him. The pocket watch he claims I took belonged to my father. It's rightfully mine." "I never thought otherwise," Steele replied simply. November brought early snow to Silver Creek, transforming the rugged landscape into a gleaming white expanse, broken by dark stands of pine. The hotel's business slowed with the weather, giving Elizabeth more time to assist Mrs. Foster with improvements to the building, hanging new curtains in the dining room, repairing worn patches in the carpet runners. Her relationship with Sheriff Steele had shifted subtly since their conversation about Jeremiah. A tentative friendship had developed, marked by longer conversations and occasional walks through town when he escorted her home from evening church services. Elizabeth found herself looking forward to his visits to the hotel, though she still maintained careful boundaries. "You're sweet on him," Mrs. Foster observed one evening as they closed the dining room. Elizabeth felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I respect him. That's different." "Is it?" Abigail smiled knowingly. "I see how your eyes follow him when he leaves. Nothing wrong with that, you know." "Even if that were true, I'm still married," Elizabeth reminded her. "And I have no intention of inviting another man to command my life." "Adam Steele isn't the commanding type," Abigail countered. "Not with women anyway. In the 3 years I've known him, I've never seen him court anyone seriously." "Too married to that badge of his." She paused, her expression softening. "But the way he looks at you is different." Elizabeth dismissed the observation, unwilling to examine the flutter in her chest whenever Steele was near. Her past with Jeremiah had taught her painful lessons about trusting men, no matter how honorable they seemed. The following week brought a violent blizzard that shut down the town for 3 days. When it finally cleared, Sheriff Steele organized men to clear paths through snowdrifts and check on outlying homesteads. Elizabeth watched from the hotel window as he directed the effort, his tall figure unmistakable among the workers. That evening, exhausted from the rescue efforts, he took dinner at the hotel. Elizabeth brought him a second cup of coffee as the dining room emptied. "Thank you," he said, his voice raspy from hours in the cold. "You're a welcome sight after a long day." Elizabeth smiled, allowing herself to sit across from him. "The whole town's talking about how you rescued the Williams family from their collapsed roof." "Just did what needed doing," he said, dismissive of the praise. "Matthews and Parker did the dangerous part." "You always do that," Elizabeth observed. "Do what?" "Minimize your role in helping others." Steele looked uncomfortable with her assessment. "Just doing my job." "Is it your job to give money to Widow Simmons for her children's shoes, or to teach young Tommy Cooper to read when his father's too busy at the mine?" He looked surprised. "How did you know about that?" "People talk," Elizabeth said, "especially to someone who serves their meals. They respect you, Adam. Not just because of the badge." It was the first time she'd used his first name, and the significance wasn't lost on either of them. A moment of silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. "Elizabeth," he began, then hesitated. "I know your circumstances. I know you're wary of entanglements. But I'd like to call on you properly sometime, if you'd permit it." Her pulse quickened. "Adam, I'm still legally married." "I understand that. I'm not proposing anything improper. Just conversation. Maybe a walk now and then." Elizabeth considered his request, weighing fear against the undeniable pull she felt toward this man who had never once made her feel threatened or diminished. "I'd like that," she finally said. Their courtship, if it could be called that given Elizabeth's marital status, progressed slowly through the winter months. Adam would escort her to church or community gatherings, sometimes joining her for quiet conversations in the hotel's parlor under Mrs. Foster's discreet supervision. He never attempted physical affection beyond offering his arm on icy walkways, respecting the boundaries Elizabeth maintained. In these conversations, Elizabeth gradually shared more of her past, her childhood in Ohio, her father's death that had left her vulnerable to Jeremiah's courtship, the slow deterioration of her marriage from promising to perilous. Adam listened without judgment, occasionally sharing his own experiences of loss and loneliness in return. "My wife died in childbirth before the war," he revealed one evening as they sat in the parlor, a respectable distance between them on the settee. "The baby, too. I enlisted afterward, not much caring if I lived or died." "I'm sorry," Elizabeth said softly. "Is that why you never remarried?" "Partly. Then after the war I just never found someone who—" He paused, looking at her directly. "Until now." The admission hung between them, too honest to dismiss, yet too complicated to fully embrace. "Adam, I don't know if I'll ever be free to—" "I'm not asking for promises," he interrupted gently. "Just telling you my truth." Spring arrived with melting snow and muddy streets. The hotel began filling again with travelers and drummers as the passes cleared. Elizabeth had been in Silver Creek for nearly a year, her position evolving to that of assistant manager as Mrs. Foster increasingly trusted her judgment. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday in April. Elizabeth was arranging flowers in the dining room when the hotel door opened, admitting a gust of spring air and her worst nightmare. Jeremiah Kane stood in the doorway, his gaze sweeping the room until it locked on her. He looked thinner than she remembered, his once handsome face hardened by drink and bitterness. "Found you at last, wife," he said, his voice carrying that false pleasantness that had always preceded his worst rages. Elizabeth's fingers tightened on the vase she held, her body frozen in place. "Jeremiah." He approached slowly, seeming to enjoy her evident fear. "You've led me on quite a chase, but a man has a right to reclaim what's his." "I'm not yours," Elizabeth said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Not anymore." Jeremiah's smile didn't reach his eyes. "The law says different. Now, pack your things. We're leaving on tomorrow's stage." "No," his expression darkened. "Still disobedient, I see. Perhaps you need a reminder of your place." When he reached for her arm, Elizabeth stepped back, knocking over a chair. The noise brought Mrs. Foster from the kitchen, her eyes widening at the scene before her. "Is there a problem here?" Abigail asked, moving to stand beside Elizabeth. "No problem," Jeremiah replied smoothly. "Just collecting my wayward wife. Family matter, you understand." "Elizabeth," Mrs. Foster said calmly, "do you want to go with this man?" "No," Elizabeth stated firmly. "I don't." Jeremiah's false pleasantness evaporated. "She doesn't have a choice. She's my wife." "In my establishment," Abigail replied, "everyone has choices. I suggest you leave now, sir." Jeremiah's face contorted with rage. "You interfering!" The hotel door opened again, and Sheriff Steele stepped in, taking in the situation at a glance. "Everything all right here, ladies?" "This doesn't concern you, lawman," Jeremiah snapped. "I'm just collecting my wife." Adam's eyes met Elizabeth's briefly before returning to Jeremiah. "Sir, if the lady doesn't wish to accompany you, that's her decision." "She's my wife," Jeremiah's voice rose. "I have legal rights." "You have the right to leave my town peacefully," Adam replied, his hand resting casually near his holster, "or the right to spend the night in my jail for disturbing the peace. Your choice." Jeremiah looked between them, calculation replacing anger in his eyes. "Fine. I'll get a room here and we can discuss this civilly tomorrow. Elizabeth's always been high-strung. Needs time to remember her duties." "We're fully booked," Mrs. Foster said immediately. "Try the saloon. They have rooms upstairs." After Jeremiah left, muttering threats under his breath, Elizabeth sank into a chair, trembling with delayed reaction. Adam knelt beside her. "Are you all right?" She nodded weakly. "He found me." "He won't take you anywhere you don't want to go," Adam promised. "Not while I'm sheriff." "The law is on his side," Elizabeth whispered. "He's my husband." "The law also says I'm responsible for keeping peace in this town." Adam's expression was determined, "and I judge him to be a threat to that peace." That night, Elizabeth hardly slept, expecting Jeremiah to somehow break into her room despite Adam's promise to keep watch over the hotel. By morning, dark circles shadowed her eyes as she helped prepare breakfast, jumping at every sound. The dining room had just opened when Adam entered, his expression grim. "Elizabeth, could I speak with you privately?" Fear clutched at her heart as she followed him to the parlor. Is it Jeremiah? Has he done something? Not exactly. Adam hesitated. He's filed a formal complaint, demanding I enforce his rights as your husband. He's threatening to contact the territorial governor if I refuse. Elizabeth's hope crumbled. So you have to help him take me back. No, Adam's voice was firm. I don't have to do anything of the sort, but we need to consider options. He's determined, and eventually he might find a judge or marshal who'll enforce his claims. What can I possibly do? Divorce is nearly impossible, especially since I'm the one who left. There might be another way. Adam seemed to be weighing his next words carefully. If there was evidence he abused you, that would change matters. Many judges will grant divorce on grounds of cruelty. Elizabeth shook her head. The bruises are long gone. It's my word against his. What about witnesses from Willow Creek? Surely someone saw your injuries. They did, she acknowledged bitterly, but no one would testify against him. They'd say I was clumsy or that I provoked him. Adam paced the small room, thinking. There's one other option, though I'm reluctant to suggest it. Please. Anything. He stopped, facing her directly. If evidence emerged that he'd committed a serious crime, something that would send him to prison for years, he'd have no claim on you. Elizabeth frowned. What crime? Beating me isn't enough, apparently. Robbery, Adam said quietly. The stagecoach robbery where we met. 3 armed men. The driver reported there might have been a 4th keeping watch at a distance. Understanding dawned slowly. You think Jeremiah was involved? I'm saying it's possible. And if he was identified as one of those bandits, his claims on you would be the least of his concerns. Elizabeth considered the implications, tempted by the possibility of permanent freedom. But something in Adam's expression gave her pause. You wouldn't manufacture evidence, she realized, even to help me. No, he admitted, I wouldn't. But I would investigate thoroughly, especially now that I have reason to believe a suspect is in my jurisdiction. Hope flickered again. What do you need from me? Did Jeremiah ever disappear for days at a time? Was he ever flush with unexpected money? Elizabeth thought back. Yes, occasionally. He claimed he won at cards, but he usually lost. There was one time, about a week before I left. He was gone 3 days and came back with enough money to pay off some of his debts. He was angry, though, said it should have been more. Adam nodded thoughtfully. That's worth looking into. For now, stay close to the hotel. Don't go anywhere alone. As he turned to leave, Elizabeth caught his hand. Adam, thank you for believing me, for helping. His fingers tightened briefly around hers. Always. The next 2 days passed in tense anticipation. Jeremiah appeared at mealtimes, watching Elizabeth with calculating eyes, but making no move to approach her directly. Adam maintained a visible presence, either himself or by having his deputy, a young man named Cooper, patrol near the hotel. On the 3rd morning, Elizabeth was serving breakfast when Jeremiah entered, looking smug. He took a seat at his usual table, then called out loudly enough for everyone to hear. I'll be needing a tray pack to take on the road, Elizabeth. We're leaving on the noon stage. He withdrew an official-looking paper from his coat. Got the district judge's order here, directing the sheriff to return my wife and property to my custody. The dining room fell silent as all eyes turned to Elizabeth, then to the doorway where Adam had just appeared. Mr. Kane, Adam said evenly, I'd like a word with you in my office. Jeremiah smirked, waving the paper. Nothing to discuss, Sheriff. Judge Hollister's order is clear. Elizabeth and my father's pocket watch come with me today, or you're in violation of the law. That watch belonged to my father, Elizabeth said, finding her voice, and I belong to no one. Still defiant, Jeremiah sighed dramatically. We'll correct that attitude once we're home. Adam stepped further into the room. Mr. Kane, I'm placing you under arrest for suspicion of involvement in the armed robbery of the Willow Creek to Silver Creek stagecoach last June. The smugness drained from Jeremiah's face. What nonsense is this? The driver identified you from a photograph I showed him yesterday. So did 2 passengers. Adam's voice remained professional, betraying none of the satisfaction Elizabeth could see in his eyes. The Wells Fargo agent is very interested in speaking with you. This is ridiculous, Jeremiah sputtered, standing so quickly his chair fell backward. You can't. I can and I am, Adam interrupted, drawing his revolver as Jeremiah's hand moved toward his coat. Slowly now. Keep your hands where I can see them. As Adam led Jeremiah away in handcuffs, the condemned man twisted to glare at Elizabeth. This is your doing. You'll regret this, Elizabeth. No one defies me. The door closed behind them, leaving an astonished silence in the dining room. Mrs. Foster appeared beside Elizabeth, placing a supportive hand on her shoulder. Well, Abigail said pragmatically, I believe the sheriff may need statements from us later. For now, these folks still need their breakfast. It was evening before Adam returned to the hotel. Elizabeth was closing the dining room when he entered, looking tired but satisfied. "Jeremiah's locked up," he reported. "The circuit judge will be here next week for his preliminary hearing." "Was there really evidence?" Elizabeth asked quietly. Adam met her gaze directly. The stagecoach driver recognized him. So did the elderly couple who were passengers that day. And when we searched his room at the saloon, we found a distinctive bandana that matched the description of those worn by the robbers. Relief washed through Elizabeth. So it wasn't just... "No," Adam assured her. "I wouldn't fabricate evidence, even for..." He paused. "Even for me?" she finished softly. "Even for you." He took a step closer. "But I would look harder for real evidence if it might help someone I care about." The admission hung between them in the quiet room. "Adam," Elizabeth began hesitantly, "even if Jeremiah goes to prison, I'm still legally his wife." "For now," he acknowledged, "but a conviction for a serious crime like armed robbery is grounds for divorce in this territory. It would take time, but you could be free. The possibility of true freedom, not just escape, but legal. Recognized independence was almost too much to comprehend." "And if I were free?" Adam's expression softened. "Then I'd hope you might consider a proposal from a man who would never command you, only cherish you." Elizabeth felt tears welling in her eyes. "I'd consider it very carefully." "That's all I ask," he said, gently taking her hand. "For now." The territorial circuit judge arrived the following week, a stern-faced man named Judge Harmon, who took residence in Silver Creek's small courthouse. The preliminary hearing was brief but decisive. The evidence against Jeremiah was compelling enough that the judge ordered him held for trial in the territorial capital. "This will likely take months to come to trial," Judge Harmon explained to Elizabeth after the hearing. "Sheriff Steele tells me you're seeking dissolution of your marriage." "Yes, Your Honor," she confirmed, "on grounds of cruelty and now criminal activity." The judge nodded thoughtfully. "The criminal conviction would certainly provide grounds, but that requires waiting for the trial outcome. Cruelty is more immediately addressable, though it requires testimony." "I have little proof beyond my word," Elizabeth admitted. "Actually," Adam interjected, "we have statements from the doctor who treated Miss Kane when she arrived in Silver Creek, as well as observations from Mrs. Foster and myself regarding her physical condition. Additionally, Mr. Kane's behavior in the hotel dining room was witnessed by over a dozen townspeople." Judge Harmon considered this information. "Very well. I'll hear the divorce petition tomorrow morning. Be prepared to testify, Mrs. Kane." The divorce hearing was an ordeal that forced Elizabeth to recount the painful details of her marriage before strangers. She described Jeremiah's escalating control and violence, the final beating that drove her to flee, and his threatening behavior since finding her in Silver Creek. Adam and Mrs. Foster corroborated her account with their observations, and Dr. Peters provided his medical assessment of her injuries from when she'd finally sought treatment weeks after arriving. When Elizabeth finished her testimony, Judge Harmon studied her thoughtfully. "Mrs. Kane, the law has traditionally favored the sanctity of marriage, even at great personal cost to those within it. However, the evidence of persistent cruelty is compelling." He shuffled papers before continuing. "Furthermore, your husband faces serious criminal charges that may result in lengthy imprisonment. Taking all factors into consideration, I hereby grant your petition for divorce on grounds of cruelty and abandonment through criminal activity." The gavel struck, and just like that, Elizabeth was legally free for the first time since her wedding day 3 years earlier. She sat in stunned silence as the judge continued. "Regarding the contested property specifically, the silver pocket watch, I find it was a gift from your father and therefore your personal property, not subject to marital division." Outside the courthouse, spring sunshine seemed brighter than Elizabeth had ever seen it. Adam stood waiting at the bottom of the steps, his expression hopeful yet restrained. "Congratulations," he said simply when she reached him. "Thank you," Elizabeth replied, feeling suddenly shy. "For everything. I wouldn't be free without your help." "You'd have found a way," he countered. "You're stronger than you realize." They walked together toward the hotel, maintaining a respectable distance that nonetheless felt charged with new possibility. "What happens now?" Elizabeth asked. "That depends," Adam replied carefully. "On what you want." Elizabeth considered her answer, aware that for the first time in years her future was entirely her own to determine. "I want to stay in Silver Creek. I've made a life here, friends, work that I enjoy." Adam nodded, hiding any disappointment he might have felt at the seemingly impersonal response. "The town's better for having you." She stopped walking, turning to face him directly. "And I want, in time, when it's proper, to consider that proposal you mentioned." The hope that bloomed in his eyes made her heart skip. "I can be patient," he said softly. Summer arrived, painting the Wyoming landscape in vibrant greens and wildflower hues. Elizabeth continued working at the hotel, though now as full manager, while Mrs. Foster focused on expanding with a new wing of rooms. News eventually reached Silver Creek that Jeremiah Kane had been convicted of armed robbery and sentenced to 15 years in territorial prison. By autumn, Elizabeth and Adam's courtship had progressed from chaperoned walks to quiet dinners and attendance at town socials as an acknowledged couple. On a golden October evening, exactly 1 year after he had first asked to call on her properly, Adam led Elizabeth to a hillside overlooking Silver Creek. The town below was outlined in lamplight against the gathering dusk, with mountains rising majestically beyond. "I brought you here for a reason," Adam said, his usual confidence giving way to nervous energy. Elizabeth smiled, suspecting what was coming. "Did you?" He took her hands in his expression earnest. "Elizabeth, this past year has shown me what true strength looks like. You rebuilt your life from nothing, faced down your fears, and emerged stronger. I admire you more than I can say." He released one of her hands to withdraw a small box from his pocket. "I promised once that no one would command you again. I stand by that promise. I don't want to be your master or your keeper, only your partner, if you'll have me." Opening the box revealed a simple gold band set with a small pearl. "Elizabeth Kane, will you marry me? Not to belong to me, but to share your life with mine as equals." Elizabeth looked at the ring, then at the man offering it, a man who had never once made her feel afraid, who had stood beside her rather than over her. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and certain. "Yes, I will." The wedding took place in Silver Creek's small church in December, with snow falling gently outside. Mrs. Foster stood as Elizabeth's witness, while Deputy Cooper supported Adam. The entire town turned out to celebrate the union of their sheriff and the hotel manager, who had become respected members of the community. At the reception held in the hotel's dining room, Adam pulled Elizabeth aside for a moment of privacy amid the festivities. "Happy?" he asked, searching her face. "More than I ever imagined possible," she replied honestly. "When I ran from Willow Creek, I was just hoping to survive. I never dreamed I'd find this a home, work I'm proud of, a husband who sees me as an equal." Adam brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch gentle. "You were never meant to be commanded, Elizabeth. You were meant to be cherished." As he leaned down to kiss her, Elizabeth knew with absolute certainty that she had finally found what had eluded her for so long, not just safety or freedom, but true partnership with a man who understood that love flourished only in the soil of respect. 2 years later, Adam and Elizabeth Steele stood on the porch of their home on the edge of Silver Creek, watching their 1-year-old daughter Grace take wobbly steps across the wooden planks. The town had grown, with a proper school now, and talks of the railroad extending a full station rather than just a spur. "Letter came today," Adam said, handing Elizabeth an envelope. "From the governor's office." Inside was an official appointment extending Adam's position as sheriff for another 4 years, with commendation for his exemplary service. "They want us to stay," Elizabeth observed, smiling as Grace tumbled into her father's waiting arms. "What do you think?" Adam asked, settling their daughter on his hip. "We could move to a bigger town if you wanted, Or I could consider that offer to join the U.S. Marshals." Elizabeth looked out at Silver Creek, the place where she had found her strength, her voice, and her true partner. The place where no one commanded her, where she made choices based on desire rather than fear. "I think," she said, slipping her arm through her husband's, "that we're exactly where we belong." Adam's smile confirmed what she already knew, that in this man, this town, this life they'd built together, Elizabeth had found not just freedom from cruelty, but the positive freedom to become fully herself. No commands, no subjugation, just mutual respect and enduring love that had transformed two wounded souls into something stronger than either could have been alone. As Grace reached for her mother, Elizabeth took her daughter in her arms, marveling at the journey that had brought her here, from a beaten woman fleeing for her life to a respected businesswoman, beloved wife, and mother. The silver pocket watch that had once been a symbol of her defiance now rested in a place of honor in their home, a reminder of the strength that had allowed her to break free and find a man who understood that true love never commands it, only cherishes.